Y'all, I thought that maintaining a boundary was the brave thing to do until it blew up my life, or at least blew up this relationship, because that was the end of it at that point. Um, this was a really rough lesson that I had to learn around people pleasing. It was the first and most visceral cost of people pleasing that I ever paid in my entire life. Or at least the first like recognition of the cost that I was paying as I was people pleasing. And it blew up a relationship with a client, and that client was also a friend. And no matter, like, I apologized, I owned my ish. I said, hey, I was wrong to do this, and I'm sorry. And she still cut me off. And that was the end of that relationship. Um, And for those of us who are in the cycle of people pleasing right now, who are feeling this kind of situation, I wanted to share this story and share what I've learned and how I do client relationships, but just relationships in general, friendships in general, um, differently now in terms of like what goes on in my mind. Because I think my mental status and the defaults that I played over and over again in my mind is what led me to not speak up for as long as I didn't, is what, in essence, then led me to try to put a boundary in place and try to be brave, and then not actually ask for what I needed, even in the midst of that, which then lost me the relationship. So, let me rewind and tell y'all what happened. So this was, as I said, a client relationship. I She approached me, and at the time I didn't have any clients, and she was also of Jamaican heritage. Actually, not of Jamaican heritage. She was Jamaican, but she was living in the US. And the way that I really liked the way that she thought, and the way that she was approaching business, and the way she was approaching her life, quite frankly. And I wanted to be on her side. And so I agreed to work with her for a set period of time, and then extended that engagement, which was way, way, way undercharged. Like, I agreed to at first give her a testing period, right? And in that testing period, she liked how I worked. I appreciated how she worked. But the continuing agreement that we made did not account for what I needed to live. And in addition to that, and when I say what I needed to live, I mean like, it's not even, to be clear, it's not even like what I needed to live. It was like what would be commiserate with the value that I was delivering for her business. Um, this was $500 a month, and I was her right-hand person doing nearly everything in her business when it came to funnels, copywriting, tech, messaging, marketing. Your girl was it. Okay. And just like being a sounding board for offer design and like messaging ideas and event planning, and like, your girl was it. And so for what I ended up gradually taking on more and more and more, scope creep is a reality. What I ended up gradually taking on more and more, I was severely undercharging for. So I undercharged from the get-go and didn't continue, like, and as the role increased, I didn't ask for what I needed. And why I didn't ask for what I needed and why this escalated over months at a time is because there started to be developed this kind of unhealthy dynamic between both of us. Because as I said, I liked the way that she thought. I liked the way that she approached life. I really appreciated her perspectives and the way that she worked. And so I liked her. And I showed up for her and I did my best for her, right? And over delivered for her. And the more she saw me showing up for her and delivering for her, is which was really like putting her needs before my own, quite frankly. Let's be real here. Um, and just doing everything, like taking initiative and doing everything in the business that needed to be done. More often than not, she wouldn't tell me, "Hey, Chelsea, I need you to do this." I would be like, "Hey, we need to do this." So, yeah, um, putting her needs before my own. And what would happen when I did that was she would give me more access to her life and her brain and her business. And so I felt, and this was the unhealthy dynamic that started to develop between us. I started to feel acceptance, belonging, significance, and also just like a really connected kind of kindred spirit kind of vibe. So over time, she became my friend, right? She started off my client. Over time, as I showed up for her and continued to do that over months and months, she became my friend. I knew all her kids. They knew me. I knew all of her business. I was in everything. Like, we were tight. Okay. We were the level of access that she had given me to her life and her person, her family, her business continued to increase and increase and increase over time because she trusted me, right? And because she felt she was safe with me. But she felt all of those things because I was continuously putting her needs before my own. All of this was happening. Chelsea continued to be her right hand person for $500 a month, overworking, over delivering, undercharging. So this was a cycle, right? I would people please, put her needs before my own, never really asked for what I needed or what I wanted financially or otherwise. Didn't take up space in the relationship. But what that led to is this increased, like, it felt like a reward. I think subconsciously it felt like a reward. I don't think I could have put it in those terms. And I don't know if she intentionally did this. I think it was literally just, I think a big part of it was just that she trusted me. And so she let me into her life. And she didn't have a lot of people that she trusted. She has been she would often share with me how she had been let down in her life a lot, disappointed a lot, used a lot by people. And so that also reinforced this desire in me to be somebody that she could count on. And so I continued to put her needs before my own, which led to this kind of increased access to her life, which led to this kind of belonging, which led me to care even more about her and her business and her success, which meant I continued to put her needs before my own, which led to even more access, and the cycle just continued. Right. And I can absolutely see this play out outside of a business relationship, because as the person who, and not absolutely, not like, not I can see this play out. This has played out in my life. It's just that the stakes were not financial. Like, because when I think back to high school or even elementary school, primary school here in Jamaica, I was 100% the listener, the safe space, the one that everybody came to, right? To help them carry their ish and to be listened to and seen and known. And what that meant at that age was I put their needs before my own. They were taking up much more space in the relationship, and I was fine with that. They were going through stuff after all. Their stuff was heavier than anything that I was going through at the time. And so I would listen. I would be that safe space. I would keep what I needed or wanted in, right? And as a result of that, I got more and more access to their lives. I got to find out all of the things that were happening, and that access gave me a sense of belonging. And that belonging led to increased care for that person. And that increased care continued to mean that I kept prioritizing their needs over my own and never actually saying what I needed or desired or how I felt, which then, of course, led to even more access, which led to more belonging, and the cycle continued. So I am just now realizing that I played this cycle out multiple times in across friendships, in primary school and in the high school. So it's no surprise, because I didn't really break my people pleasing habit. It's no surprise that I played the same thing out with a client when the stakes were higher. Suffice it to say, it was a really unhealthy codependent relationship. and she didn't know. My role in this relationship was to be the trusted one, the safe space, the one that could be relied on. And what that meant was Chelsea shrank. Chelsea people pleased. And I was so viscerally anxious about disappointing her and letting her down and being grouped with the people who had disappointed her and let her down and who she couldn't trust to show up for her and be reliable for her in the past. And so I would push myself. I would push to continue to show up for her, regardless of the fact that she wasn't paying me for any of this. And she would continue to promise and promise and say that, like, once we hit this in the business, once we do this, once we do that, once we do that, like, then she'll be able to pay me because she really appreciates me showing up the way that I am, etc., etc., etc. So this dynamic continued for months. And I'm almost sure that we had this business relationship slash friendship going for over a year, y'all. So she was my friend. She was my legit good friend. I was her friend. And I was also like her right-hand person in her business. But the problem was I was growing increasingly resentful and feeling more and more that this was unfair and that she couldn't ask me to do this much and I couldn't continue to do this much without pay. But again, viscerally anxious to displease her and become somebody that she feels used by. She feels like she can't trust. She feels like it's not reliable, right? And so I never actually said that out of my mouth. I just kind of grumbled about it and complained about it to myself and brought it up a couple times with like my family who were in my immediate vicinity, and so they were the first ones to hear about it. And bring it up and reinforce it to me too. So the resentment gradually grew and grew and grew until I was like, you know what, Chelsea, you need a break. You have to set a boundary here. So I was gonna work through Christmas that year, and I decided actually I'm not gonna do that. And so I told her, hey, I'm taking 2 weeks off over Christmas break. I'll be back in the first week of January, and so I'm still working to finish up XYZ ABC. And I'm almost sure that I said to her, I may not finish before I leave, but maybe I didn't. Because again, Chelsea's working real hard not to disappoint this person, right? Didn't want to let her down, didn't want her to think badly of me in any way. Because at this point, again, subconsciously, I don't think I knew this, but at this point, it was about my belonging and my safety. This relationship was a significant relationship in my life, and I felt like I was contributing in a positive way to someone else's life. And that gave me a real sense of, I think, significance and belonging and sort of, I won't go so far as to say purpose, but contribution, like significant contribution in the world. Meanwhile, I'm also, like, flip side of that coin, resentful because for my contribution, I am not getting what I feel like I am due. And because of the previous side of the coin, I can't actually say that. So toxic, highly toxic, right? Um, Suffice it to say, I tell her I'm taking a couple weeks over Christmas break. I'm not going to be available for any kind of call or communication. I'm going to be out of communication. I made that very clear. I remember that. But I was working to finish something up. I didn't finish it. I don't remember if I told her that I didn't finish it or not. It could be that I didn't tell her because I didn't want to disappoint her. And so I just ghosted. At the time, I wouldn't classify it ghosting because I was coming back to finish the work. And I think I had mentioned to her, as I said, that I'm not sure if I'd be able to finish, but I'm going to try and finish. And again, I would always keep my deadlines more or less. And so it was very unusual for me to not finish something. So I think if I said that, she didn't hear me, or it could be again that I didn't say that. Like, I was out of comms range. I made that really clear. I would be out of communication, and the work was not done. Um, and so I think when she saw that it wasn't finished, and this was over the Christmas break, she started trying to reach out to me to figure out, okay, what was going on. And I think she also wanted a few other things from me. And again, keep in mind that by this time, Chelsea is high key resentful, but silencing herself and not saying anything. And so in the back of my mind, I'm like, I have to maintain a boundary here. I have to put a boundary in place, tell her I'm leaving for 2 weeks, right? Tell her I will not be in, because we would talk almost every day, if not every other day. There would not be a week that would go by without us communicating, right? So this was weird in our relationship dynamic, but because of the resentment I was feeling, being always leaned on, being always pulled on, and not feeling like the access started to not be enough, basically. And I didn't have what I needed to live because I was undercharging, and resentment crept up because I was over delivering for what I was being paid. And so at that point, I was like, well, I have to state what I need here. And now I'm speaking, I'm finally unsilencing myself. But I'm unsilencing myself from resentment, not from a place of like, no, I backed myself. I'm taking care of myself, and therefore I need to speak. Only. I think if I had spoken way earlier, it would have been that. But now it was that and resentment. And because of that, I ended up, she is reaching out to me over this Christmas break multiple times, blowing up my phone. I was not answering because, in my mind, maintaining this boundary, being brave enough to actually maintain the boundary that I set with her, mattered to me. And I really wanted to show up for myself in that way, because I felt like this whole time, I think I realized I wasn't showing up for myself. I wasn't saying what I needed. And the way I was allowing this dynamic to continue was not okay. And I deserved better, and I deserved more. And that's what I told myself. And so I was like, so Chelsea, you are going to maintain this boundary. And it's going to be uncomfortable, and you're not going to like it, but you are going to do it because this matters. And so she's blowing up my phone. Your girl is not answering. And I don't remember if it was when I came back after break, or if I cracked and decided, no, Chelsea, she is blowing up your phone. You need to answer her. But eventually I spoke to her, and that was a crap show. Suffice it to say, that was a mess. It was a mess because she laid into me, y'all. And because she was contacting me not just about the work, but about other things, um, a part of me definitely felt like, but I told you I was going to be out of communication. Why are you so upset? Like, why are you railing on me in this way? Um, but the other part of me knew that, like, I had said I was going to finish the work, and I didn't finish the work. And so if I'm remembering correctly, it was a big blowout. And I let her go on. I didn't say anything. And I sat with it. And then at the end of the call, I said to her, like, I'm going to call you back tomorrow so that we can decide how we move forward, or something along those lines. We both agreed to reconnect after that. And I sat with it for the rest of the day, and I was like, Chelsea, you were wrong. You were wrong here. You were wrong on multiple levels, and you were wrong in terms of a massive delay of timeline, because these are things that you should have said way earlier. And so I think, if I'm remembering correctly, what ended up happening was I we got on another call. I called her back and I was like, hey, I apologize. This was on me. I was people pleasing with you and I didn't tell you what I needed. But I can't continue to work with all of these deliverables and with this level of you pulling on me in the business and in life with this pay scale. This is not going to work. And I was resentful of that and didn't speak about what I needed for so long that it turned out this way. I now felt that I had to maintain my boundaries with you, and you didn't even realize what was happening, and that was on me. I am sorry. And I apologized, and she was like, "Yeah, I hear you. Um, however, we can't have a business relationship going forward." And she was very like succinct and blunt about that. And I was like, okay, that's absolutely fair. Because it is like somebody doesn't show up for you in your business, and I mean, regardless of whether or not you're underpaying them, that's a separate issue. But um you reserve the right to break a client relationship, I think, when a contractor does not meet their obligations and doesn't communicate adequately around how they did not meet those obligations. Even if there were other areas within which you were wrong and you could have done better. I think you still deserve you still reserve the right to break that client relationship. Um, and then go learn from your errors, of course. But like fair. So I was like, okay, yeah, I understand that. But me now, valuing this relationship, not wanting to lose her as a friend, I say to her, I pluck up my courage because by now I'm feeling all kinds of torn up because not only did I not do right by myself, but in not doing right by myself, I didn't do right by her. And in this conversation, I think I took a lot of the blame and she didn't take any. And so everything was resting very heavily on me. And again, that's a separate issue because I can't control whether or not she takes responsibility for how this relationship went down. Right? I have no control over that. So I'm not even going to touch that whether or not she was wrong or not because that's her business. But at this point in the conversation, the weight of who was wrong in the relationship was resting heavily upon me from her perspective and from my own perspective. And so at that point, I am all kinds of torn up, feeling so much guilt and so much shame, and plucking up my courage to be like, okay, Chelsea, you don't want to lose this relationship. Say something. Ask for what you need. Ask for what you want. The most you can say is no, and then you'll know. And that'll be that, right? So I ask her if a friendship could be on the table. Because remember, y'all, we were like this. I knew her family. I knew all her business. I knew her dating stories. I knew her business stories. I knew her finances. Y'all, I knew nearly every single thing. I knew her history. Like, I knew so much about this woman's life and her business. And so I was like, I don't want to lose her as a friend. So I ask, can friendship be on the table? She says at this stage in her life, she is not focused on friendships. She is focused on making the business work and she is focused on relationships that can move the business and her financial goals and her goals for her kids and her family forward. She's not focused on friendships, and that's not something that she can meet me in. So in that moment, I'm like, well, that is it. I apologized. I owned it. She still cut me off. And that was the end of that relationship. I haven't spoken to her since. I wish her well. I pray for her kids all the time. Um, and I wish the best for her life and her business. But that was it. And it was a very expensive lesson for me to learn about the cost of people pleasing in a relationship, not just a business relationship, but a personal one. Um, and the way that ripped me up for weeks after that, because I I didn't back myself, didn't ask for what I needed, allowed the resentment to stew and bubble and ferment and get really gross over the course of months. One, two, I didn't do right by a client. And like my standard of excellence in terms of what I want to deliver for our clients is way too high sometimes, which is why I over deliver, not sometimes, all the time, which is why I tend to over deliver. However, regardless of how high that standard is, not meeting it even remotely and failing to complete and adequately communicate lack of completion to a client, bruh, Chelsea doesn't do that. So I am feeling all kinds of failure in terms of just like client relationship and good practice and the way I want to treat my people that I work with, right? Two, and then three, I am looking at this relationship as a friendship and looking at how I treated her as her friend and losing that connection, that sense of safety, that belonging. That was hard. So I was all kinds of torn up on multiple fronts for weeks after everything went down. But I'll tell you what it did for me. The monument of people pleasing that I had set up in my heart this whole time, not knowing that this is what I was doing from a very young age, but that I erected in my heart and dug hundreds of feet deep into the ground. This thing, so if you imagine like a massive pillar of like dark gray stone, and it's hundreds of feet deep into the earth and hundreds of feet high above the surface of the earth. That monument cracked from the bottom, come all the way up to the top that day. It was the first really big, I think, fracture in my people pleasing default that I'd ever felt this viscerally, period, that I'd ever felt at all. And it was so massive that in every single friendship after that, I was very like, I was so concerned about no, Chelsea, you cannot people please, you cannot people please, you cannot people please. And even after that, I still fell into people pleasing. The monument still stood. She was cracked, but she still was there, established over decades of living. She not going to disappear that easily. But I learned a lesson that day around asking for what I needed and asking for it early. And I didn't learn the over delivery lesson because I continued to do that. I didn't learn the over delivery undercharging lesson because I definitely continued to do that. That lesson came later in October 2024, which I've talked about in multiple videos on this channel. That monument in October 2024 crumbled. That was it. Your girl couldn't people please after that. I was like, oh my gosh, my whole life and all of my dreams have been the cost of this people pleasing situation. Look, it's the cost of keeping this monument erected in my life. No, we refuse. This is the end. Your girl tore that thing down in October 2024. But this relationship started the deterioration of my default of people pleasing. And it was a hard lesson. It was a really, really hard lesson to learn, but it led me to this point where right now I can stand in my relationships and my friendships and I can look at them and be like, no, 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 no. How I have new standards for how I treat people in relationships, professionally and personally. And this is what I wish I had known. I wish I had known this when I first engaged her, right after that testing period. Like right after that testing period, we should have put something in place that would have kept me from continuing to work for her in perpetuity at that rate, right? However, I didn't know. Now I do. And these are the three things that I really am working on embedding as its own monument in my heart around my relationships. Thing number one, I assume positive intent. If this person is somebody who's been in my life, if they care about me and I have evidence of that, I do not assume anymore, or at least I try to not assume, and I actively talk my brain out of assuming that they will get mad, that I will disappoint them to the point of ruin, that anything that I can do would ruin the relationship, or that they're out to get me or use me or hurt me. And I used to assume negative intent. I used to assume that, and when I say assume negative intent, there were thoughts absolutely of like, no, you're just trying to use me here. That would come up from time to time, but the prominent sort of through line of this like this default that I had of assuming negative intent was that they would always put their needs before my own. I think that was the negative intent that I was assuming, that they were in this for them and not for the relationship. And when I had evidence to the contrary, understand me, this is not people with whom I didn't have evidence that they cared. I saw how they cared for me. Even her, like the level of access that she was giving me in her life and the way she treated me and talked about me, even if she wasn't paying me well, right? There was evidence of care there. Now, there was other evidence of other things that were unhealthy, but there was also evidence of care there. And so when I have evidence of care, evidence of their ability to put me first in some ways, right? Like, it wasn't fair for me to continue to assume that they would put themselves first. Because what I used to do is assume that and therefore not ask for what I needed and continue and follow the trend that I've been doing of putting them first. And they, not realizing that that is what I was doing, would continue to put themselves first and continue the sort of status quo that we had had in the relationship, not realizing it because I didn't speak. Now, hear me. I'm not taking all the responsibility because there are two people in a relationship, right? I'm not saying that this is not something that they couldn't have seen and started to remedy. It absolutely is. However, I have to take responsibility for my own choices and my own decisions. And if I had spoken and not assumed that they would continue to prioritize themselves, even after I shared what I needed, that would have headed off a lot of resentment. It would have headed off a lot of problems. It would have headed off this blow up because I would have said something, right? So now I assume positive intent. I assume especially because I have evidence for this assumption, and it wouldn't even really be an assumption because I have evidence of it. So it's a conclusion. Like, I conclude positive intent because I know and I have evidence of the fact that they can put me before themselves and they can prioritize my interests in this relationship over their own at times. So that's the first thing that I currently do, which then allows me to not spiral about what I think they will do and how I think they will think about me. And therefore, I can say what I need to say because the spiral just like gets cut off, which leads me to the second thing that I do, which is I assume a positive response as well. Now, That might not be the case. I might absolutely get a negative response, or rather get a response that I don't want. But if I speak early, it's more likely that I get a response that, even if it's not what I want, it's still a connected response. It's still okay, this is not a need that I can meet in the way that you are asking, but I do want to meet this need in some way. So let's figure out what that can look like, right? Because what I would do is assume that they couldn't put me first, and therefore then assume that when I then said what I needed, they would end the relationship, or they would get mad, or they would get disappointed, or I would become someone in their mind that was not safe, that could not be relied on, that didn't deserve access to their lives, that they shouldn't care about because all I was doing was using them. Spiral. Right? The spiral is in full swing. And because I would assume that that would be the kind of response they would have, I then adjusted my reaction and my actions and my decisions as if that response was a real response, when it was literally a made up reality in my mind. So now I am acting in the real world and making decisions in the real world based on a fantasy, not reality, not someone's actual actions, words, or thoughts, but what I think they will say, do, or decide. And I lived that way for a very long time. And I explicitly decide now not to assume what people will say or do, and just know I can only control my own reactions. And the evidence I have is that they care. So let's just assume it will go okay. Even if it's not going to give me everything that I'm looking for, let's assume that like it's not going to be catastrophic at the end of the relationship. Let's assume that I'm not going to completely fall apart because they've like ended things, right? So that's the second thing that I do. And then the third thing that I do that really, really helps me is stepping outside of my listener safe space shoes and saying what I need, saying how I feel, and saying it early. Don't wait to say it. And I'm still working on this. All of these I'm still working on, y'all, because this is a default that I am. The monument has crumbled. But I'm rebuilding something in its place. And so this is what I'm working on rebuilding actively and continuously. I no longer think people are incapable of considering me. And when I talk about putting my interests and my needs before their own, that's what I mean. Is considering me in their whole interest and decision making. I no longer think people are incapable of doing that. And I no longer assume or conclude that it's going to be a catastrophe if I say what I need. And therefore, that frees me to actually say what I need. And I'm practicing also saying it early, because the earlier I say it, the less I'm speaking from resentment, and the more I can speak from, no, actually, I know that you didn't mean to hurt me, that you didn't mean anything wrong by this. And I know you want to stay connected with me, and I want to stay connected with you. And so I want to take up space in this relationship so you know how I feel and you know what I need, and we stay connected and we don't start to disconnect from one another because I haven't taken up space and said what I needed or felt. And so it creates a new kind of cycle, right? Where I no longer create this whole reality in my head, and then now I only act and respond based on what I see in front of me, the evidence that I see in front of me, not the suppositions and ideas of what I think, what I think they'll do, what I think they'll decide, what I think they'll feel. We don't do that around here anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't consider how they may feel, but I don't spiral into it. And I try my best in that consideration. It's a fine line to walk, because I do think that there's something to be said for trying your best to communicate in a way that will allow you to be seen and heard by people, especially the people who you want to be seen and heard by, right? So choosing your words carefully, and being very conscious of the ways that you share what you share, is helping the other person connect with you and helping the other person see you. But you can't control their actions. I know I can't control their actions. And so there has to, the line that I walk is like, how much consideration is too much consideration and leads to spiraling, where I'm now over adjusting and silencing and shrinking and not saying what I need to say because I am anxious about or fearful of what their response will be, their decisions will be, their perception of me will be. So yeah, y'all, those are the three things that I am working on in terms of like rewriting this default. But this was a really hard lesson to learn. This was a really, really, really hard lesson for me to learn. And it led to the fall of the people pleasing pillar. Chelsea no longer defaults to that, which is I'm really proud of myself for the progress that I have made around that, because it's been decades coming. It's been decades coming. If you are in the middle of your own people pleasing cycle, please sound off in the comments. I want to make space for us to feel all the feelings, however this feels for you. If you've come out of your own people pleasing cycle, what was the straw that broke the camel's back? What was that for you? Or maybe what was the first domino? Since this video was a first domino kind of video, what was the first domino? What was the first kind of tremor that cracked the people pleasing monument in your own life? I'm curious. Feel free to share in the comments below. And go ahead and subscribe if you are interested in talking more about relationships, friendships, people pleasing, personal development, all those kinds of things. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I will see you in the next one. Take care.